President Lee Jae-myung continued his G7 summit schedule in France on Wednesday, calling for greater international cooperation and balanced solutions to address the key global challenges. The U.S. is reportedly prepared to grant Iran sweeping economic incentives under a proposed peace agreement, including immediate access to global oil markets and participation in a $300 billion development fund, though key provisions remain subject to further negotiations. South Korea's defense ministry announced a plan Wednesday to relax access controls in border areas near North Korea, a move aimed at boosting civilian activity and revitalizing local communities. Over in France, President Lee Jae-myung attended the second session of this year's G7 summit, where he is expected to share a detailed vision to address global imbalances. Our Yoon Jung-min is part of the traveling press corps and follows this report from Geneva.
Session 2 of this year's G7 summit focuses on addressing major global imbalances. President Lee Jae-myung, who's been invited to the expanded talks, plans to highlight the need to resolve global imbalances in a harmonious, coordinated manner rather than confrontation. He is also expected to discuss with his foreign counterparts systematic, longer-term response measures to address vulnerability in energy security in East Asia, recently revealed in the course of the conflict in the Middle East. The South Korean president will also introduce his efforts to strengthen critical mineral supply chains. In the following working lunch, AI innovation will take up the key topic. World leaders are in the French town of Evian-les-Bains this week, which sits on the southern shore of Lake Geneva, for the gathering of the world's most influential powers.
How are you, Mr. President? I'm so happy.
Session 1 on Tuesday addressed reforming the current international development cooperation system, aiming to reduce financial dependency on external assistance. In line with that, the South Korean president stressed the importance of private capital, introducing a recent case where South Korea helped Indonesia secure private investment worth $50 million through its financial assistance in the agriculture and energy sectors. President Lee pitched his vision for a global AI basic society where the fruits of AI technology are shared with all countries, and he also brought up the need to bolster vocational training in developing nations. With this, the South Korean president concludes his 10-day-long trip to Europe. Blue House officials say it signals the administration's fully-fledged diplomacy with the bloc as Korea enhances its role in the face of a fast-changing global order. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Geneva.
A major diplomatic breakthrough may be on the horizon over in the Middle East. Bloomberg has obtained what it says is a draft 14-point MOU between the U.S. and Iran. Now, the deal aims to end the war permanently and pave the way for long-term nuclear negotiations. Our Park Jun-han has the latest.
The path toward ending the conflict between Washington and Tehran is taking concrete shape. A report containing the draft Memorandum of Understanding obtained by Bloomberg revealed on Wednesday that both nations were set to formally sign an agreement on Friday in Switzerland. The document establishes an immediate and permanent end to the war on all fronts, explicitly including the volatile Lebanon front. Under the terms, the United States will lift its naval blockade, allowing commercial traffic in the Strait of Hormuz to return to pre-war levels within 30 days. In return, Iran will clear technical obstacles and mines to guarantee free navigation. Washington has agreed to issue immediate treasury waivers for Iranian crude oil and petrochemical exports, while negotiations for a final treaty take place over the next 60 days. To unlock these benefits, Tehran must make strict nuclear concessions. Iran is required to completely freeze its nuclear program during the 60-day negotiation window and explicitly commit to never producing nuclear weapons. The sensitive issue of its existing enriched uranium stockpile will be left for the final agreement. If Tehran follows through, the economic incentive is massive. The draft claims the U.S. and its allies plan to secure at least $300 billion for Iran's economic recovery, alongside the gradual release of billions in frozen international assets. While the draft sets a clear timeline, actual implementation will be a different story. Achieving a final agreement will require coordination with regional allies and approval through the United Nations Security Council and the Board of Governors of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Park Junan, Arirang News.
While Washington and Tehran prepare to formalize their peace framework in Switzerland this Friday, renewed Israeli strikes on Hezbollah positions in Lebanon are casting doubt on the prospects for a lasting regional stability. Our Shin So-eun has this report.
Following the electronic signing of an interim agreement, the United States and Iran will formally sign their armistice memorandum of understanding in Bürgenstock, Switzerland on Friday. According to Swiss authorities, the venue was moved from Geneva to the secluded Alpine location with the mountain resort overlooking Lake Lucerne in central Switzerland. The new location comes at the request of the U.S., Iran, and the Middle East mediators to offer tighter securities and protection. Regarding the release of the agreement, President Donald Trump says it will be made public within a couple of days and that he plans to submit the document to Congress for review. But administration officials say the delay is deliberate.
So there are some diplomatic protocols, Sean. There are some sequencing that the Pakistanis have been involved in this, the Qataris have been involved in this. And what the president has said is the agreement will come out on Friday. He may decide to release the agreement sooner than that. But we have this formal ceremony on Friday, and that's when the president right now wants to release the memorandum.
Despite efforts to finalize a peace deal in Lebanon, where a ceasefire remains one of Tehran's key demands, violence has yet to be halted. Israeli drone strike killed at least 4 people on Tuesday as clashes between Israel and the Iran-backed Hezbollah militia continued. In response, Trump publicly rebuked and urged Israel to scale back its military campaign against Hezbollah. Accusing Israeli strikes on Beirut of jeopardizing his peace efforts with Tehran, Trump added that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu should show greater restraint and responsibility with Lebanon. The continued fighting in Lebanon has become a growing source of tension between the two leaders, with Iran making a ceasefire there a key condition of the broader peace agreement. Shin So-eun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has voiced confidence that the war in Ukraine can also be resolved, pointing to recent diplomatic gains in the Middle East. Lee Seung-ja has the details.
President Donald Trump said Tuesday that he wants to turn his attention to ending the war in Ukraine after reaching a framework agreement with Iran, and told reporters that the Middle East issue will soon be in the rear-view mirror. Speaking on the sidelines of the Group of 7 summit in France, Trump said he had a very good meeting with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky and planned to meet him again later in the day. Trump said he would do whatever he could to help bring an end to the conflict and urged Russia to negotiate a settlement. The U.S. leader noted that both Russia and Ukraine have suffered heavy losses during the war and stressed that a deal should be reached as soon as possible.
Look, Russia should make a deal. Russia's lost tremendous amounts of people, and so has Ukraine. Last month, they lost 35,000 soldiers between the two of them.
Ukraine continues to demonstrate its ability to strike targets deep inside Russia, using drones and missiles to put growing pressure on the Kremlin, while Moscow has vowed to carry out what it calls systematic attacks on Ukraine. Early Monday, Russian forces launched a series of deadly attacks on Kyiv, including an attack that set fire to a historic monastery. Despite the ongoing challenges, Trump struck an optimistic tone, saying he had productive conversations with both Russian President Vladimir Putin and Zelensky ahead of the summit. He added that there may now be an opportunity to make progress toward ending the war as diplomatic efforts gain renewed attention from world leaders gathered at the G7. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
A former White House official under President Donald Trump says South Korea and the U.S. should strengthen civilian nuclear cooperation in response to evolving geopolitical challenges. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young tells us more.
Washington shouldn't waste any time in strengthening its energy security and industrial base by expanding civil nuclear cooperation with Korea, a trusted ally. That's according to Vice Chair of America First Policy Institute Fred Fleitz, who says Seoul has earned broader rights to develop peaceful nuclear technology.
President Trump decided it was time to modernize this relationship. We're not there yet in terms of giving North giving South Korea access to the full nuclear fuel cycle. But obviously we're moving in that direction. I think it's a good development.
His comments come as Seoul and Washington this month held their first round of negotiations on Korea's rights to uranium enrichment, spent fuel reprocessing, and civil nuclear cooperation. Korea operates one of the world's most advanced nuclear power industries, with reactor technology exported to the UAE and selected for an $18 billion project in the Czech Republic. Meanwhile, the US is racing to rebuild domestic fuel supply chains as AI and data centers drive up demand for power, which the Electric Power Research Institute says could consume up to 9% of US electricity by 2030. However, Washington has limited capacity to produce fuel for next-generation reactors, relying on Russia for roughly one-third of its enrichment services as of 2023. Flights argues Korea could help address such challenges. Yet, outdated restrictions stand in the way.
The Netherlands, Brazil, and Argentina can make their own nuclear fuel rods, but South Korea cannot. That makes no sense. Japan and India can reprocess spent fuel rods. Now, if we can trust India and Brazil and Argentina with the sensitive nuclear technology, obviously South Korea can be trusted.
Some non-proliferation experts have long opposed the spread of enrichment and reprocessing technologies. But Flights points to Korea's record of responsible nuclear stewardship.
And they don't want nuclear technology spreading to nations who may use them for weapons purposes. South Korea is clearly not one of them. It has a model record in abiding by its nuclear treaty obligations.
The former Trump advisor says deeper cooperation would benefit both countries as they seek reliable energy supplies and resilience in critical industries.
I believe that South Korean companies are on the brink of some remarkable discoveries and new innovations that will produce significant amounts of fuel at much lower cost with much less waste and will reduce the need for carbon fuel.
Korean officials say Seoul and Washington could hold a second round of negotiations as early as July. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Korea's inflation is expected to remain elevated through year-end, with upward price pressures likely to persist into next year. Our Baek Joo-hee reports.
Korea's consumer inflation will hover around 3% in the second half of this year, according to the Bank of Korea's biannual inflation review report released on Wednesday. Core inflation is also forecast to reach the mid to high 2% range. Even looking ahead to next year, the central bank expects both headline and core inflation to continuously exceed its target stability level of 2%.
It will likely take a long time for energy supply chains to normalize to previous levels and for global oil prices to stabilize.
Taking a closer look at this year's inflation path, consumer prices started the year stable at 2%. However, the trend sharply reversed following the outbreak of the Middle East conflict, with May inflation bounding back to 3.1%. A key concern for policymakers is a lingering impact of high energy costs. The central bank notes that even if global oil prices cool, the indirect effects of high energy costs typically take about 6 months to fully fit into other manufactured goods and processed foods, and can persist for up to a year. Adding fuel to the fire is an unprecedented surge in corporate bonuses within the booming IT and semiconductor sectors.
Wage hikes also risk further intensifying upward inflationary pressures from both the cost and demand sides.
The central bank warns that when top-tier bonuses are heavily concentrated in specific industries, it elevates reference wages nationwide. This creates general wage hike pressures across other sectors, which eventually stimulates demand-side inflation by adding an extra 0.05 percentage points to consumer prices. The governor of the central bank dismissed speculations of a potential big step interest rate hike, drawing a clear line by saying it was a measure brought up only when the market conditions were tough. Baek Joo-hee, Arirang News.
The government plans to widen civilian access along the inter-Korean border by easing military controls and redesignating large portions of restricted land. Our Kim Bo-kyung tells us more.
The Defense Ministry has rolled out plans to ease civilian restricted buffer zone boundaries along the border with North Korea. The Civilian Control Line, or CCL, is a buffer zone controlling civilian access for military operations within 10 kilometers south of the military demarcation line. It is currently set at an average of 8 kilometers south of the NDL, but there have been calls for changes from inconvenienced residents. Thus, it will be reduced to an average of 6 kilometers, moving upward by an average of 2 kilometers. The adjustments will start next year and will be covered by the defense budget.
We will reinforce control measures, such as relocating CCL checkpoints and installing fences and CCTV, and gradually adjust the civilian control line starting in 2027.
Adding to the CCL plans, the ministry also aims to lift restrictions on approximately 450 square kilometers of the restricted protection zone, that is around 150 times the size of Yeouido, to allow private property development.
We will revise the designation criteria for restricted protection zones south of the MDL, currently applied uniformly even to low-importance areas, to minimize operational and management burdens while enabling regional development without compromising military operations.
The ministry will start the review process in the second half of this year. Through the adjustment of the CCL and the redefinition of restricted protection zone criteria, the total area will amount to about 240 times the size of Yeouido. Now, with more public access to military-controlled zones expected, one expert said there should be thorough measures to deal with potential problems.
Civilians and soldiers will now be mixed together. So the first issue is how to classify and control them. The second is the plan to introduce AI and other advanced technologies. Specifically, what kinds of advanced technologies, and in the case of AI, what types of AI are actually being considered.
The ministry will also remove military structures considered to have lost tactical utility from 23 locations in border regions. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Efforts are underway to list Asia's shared lacquer culture as a UNESCO intangible cultural heritage. Experts from 8 Asian nations have gathered here in the country to map out a joint nomination, highlighting Wonju as a key heritage site. Our culture correspondent Jung Hae-rim takes us there.
A craftsman carefully scores the bark of an onnamu or lacquer tree, and milky white sap slowly emerges. Visitors to this grove in Wonju, Gyeongsangbuk-do Province gather round as the liquid is collected into a bamboo case. Known as ochil or lacquer, this natural coating has been used for centuries across Asia to protect and beautify wood. And Wonju is home to Korea's only domestic lacquer production site. So it is here at Wonju Lacquer Culture Center where masters of various crafts demonstrate techniques passed down through generations, from refining raw sap to creating colorful artworks.
Raw lacquer is the pure sap extracted directly from the tree, used without heavy processing. Because it is harvested only here in Wonju in very limited amounts, it is extremely rare and precious. Its charm is how it enhances the wood. Once applied, it brings the natural grain to life, preserving its raw beauty.
Even after more than 40 years, it's still fascinating to watch each pattern come together piece by piece. Without that feeling, I wouldn't still be doing this. What keeps me going is persistence. And I've always felt a responsibility to carry on Korea's traditions.
This may look like thread, but it's actually paper-thin abalone shells. Under a Korean technique named geuneumjil, artisans cut and place each piece into a groove and then seal it with lacquer, and every line takes absolute precision. The number of artisans is declining. Younger generations are showing less interest in inheriting the craft, and raw materials are becoming increasingly scarce. Korea and 7 other Asian countries, including China, Japan, and Vietnam, are pushing for a joint UNESCO inscription for lacquer culture, aiming to preserve the shared heritage.
I'm simply impressed by the quality and dedication of the masters you have, and the kind of investment the government is making to promote lacquer culture, not only as a national treasure, national heritage, but also a collective heritage from different countries in Asia. Wonderful effort that Korea has put forward, and UNESCO is very much appreciating it.
Participating countries plan to conduct joint research and prepare a multinational domination document over the next 2 years, with the goal of submitting a joint application to UNESCO in 2029. 정혜림, Arirang News, Wonju.
A leading culinary institute over in Paris says interest in Korean temple cuisine is steadily growing in France as more people there embrace plant-based, mindful approaches to eating. Our culture correspondent Park Kwon-woo files this report from the ground.
Korean temple food continues to grow in popularity, especially in France, one of the world's gastronomic capitals. At prestigious culinary school Le Cordon Bleu, Paris, the centuries-old Korean tradition has been taught for a decade. And according to the school's top chef, demand is continuing to grow as more people seek healthier and more balanced diets.
People have become increasingly concerned about the health and purity of what they eat. This has led to a growing interest in temple food. Fermentation, which brings probiotics and plays an important role in a healthy, balanced diet. And temple food, in particular, gives us a very different vision of ingredients and what a balanced diet can be.
The growing global interest comes as Korea's Buddhist community is pushing to have temple food recognized as a UNESCO intangible cultural heritage. Riffer believes the tradition deserves the recognition.
What UNESCO has recognized in France is not simply food, but its culinary tradition. It's about families gathering around the table and sharing a moment together. Korean temple food, with its focus on balance, health, and spirituality, also deserves recognition as a heritage. It is not just food, but a living cultural tradition.
Looking ahead, Le Cordon Bleu Paris plans to deepen its cooperation with Korea's culinary community. So this year marks the 140th anniversary of diplomatic ties between Korea and France. Do you see any opportunities for deeper cooperation between the school and Korea?
Diplomacy is also culinary diplomacy and cultural exchange. This year, there will be more demonstrations on Korean temple food open to the public. We also have big premises at the very heart of Paris set to be open for workshops and demonstrations of Korean temple food.
From Paris to Seoul, the school says Korean cuisine will continue to serve as a bridge between the two countries, deepening cultural exchange and mutual understanding. Park Kwon-woo, Arirang News, Paris.
The midsummer heat continues to trigger scattered showers, so you may want to keep an umbrella handy. Many inland areas nationwide are expected to see showers through early tomorrow morning. 5 to 60 millimeters of rainfall is expected, and some areas could be hit by strong gusts, lightning, and even hail. A few inland areas may see additional showers tomorrow. In terms of how much rain, 5 to 30 millimeters are expected during the afternoon. Amid the heat, this year's first heat advisory will take effect at 11 a.m. tomorrow for Gyeongsan, Yecheon, and Guni in the Gyeongsangbuk-do Province and Daegu area. So please stay hydrated and take care of your health in the heat. As for temperatures, most areas will start the day at around 20 degrees. Seoul 21 degrees, Chuncheon at 19 degrees, Daegu at 21 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 31 degrees, Daegu at 33 degrees, Busan at 28 degrees. Looking ahead, southern regions and Jeju Island are forecast to see another round of rain on Friday and Saturday. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.